to soul, soul 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 to soul.
Today here we have with us Brother Ashish. He's from London and he's been practicing Raj Yoga meditation since 12 years. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you.
What was your childhood all about?
So it was interesting because my family came into Gyan when I was, or took this knowledge and understood spirituality when I was about 1 year old. So they began to transform their life as they individually took benefit. And it was interesting because, I lived in a big family. I had my mum, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, there's 4 kids, there's my grandparents as well, all lived under one roof.
A joint family.
One family in one big house. But my mum came to the knowledge first and understood spirituality, and then everyone else began to come slowly. So over a period of about 6 or 7 years, everyone took knowledge, everyone began to understand spirituality and understand more the lifestyle behind what the Brahmakumaris is all about. So my childhood was very loving, very, my parents didn't have much, but they really looked after us, as children. So I don't feel like there was anything lacking. And for a long part, I felt very content. I didn't have any questions, we didn't have any sorrow, we didn't have any conflict in the house. So I didn't know anything different. So my childhood kind of began in that way. We began to naturally just emerge spirituality as a practical form of life. And that's really how everything, started for me. And then I kind of, school began, as a teenager, you begin to kind of understand a bit more about the outside world, and you can see the differences in your friends' families versus the differences in yours. But nothing had quite clicked in me. And I would go to the centre, and for me the centre was a place of love. I didn't really understand much by way of spiritual knowledge, but I felt the vibrations of love. There's this one particular sister at the centre who would and I would go because of her and because of how she would call me with so much sweetness and love. She was almost like my second mother. A practical example of what spirituality is all about, what this knowledge is all about. So that was how my childhood kind of evolved. I was more an emotional, sensitive child who responded to love rather than understanding of knowledge, Never very academic. My sisters were more cleverer than I was. I always wanted to enjoy myself. So that's kind of how my childhood started, really.
So were you born in a golden spoon?
I probably was. I was given everything I wanted. There was nothing lacking in my life. But equally, my desires were, a few toys here and there. It wasn't Facebook or mobile phones or going out to parties and things like that. It was simple pleasures. We'd go to the beach for picnics on a Sunday. That to me was everything. I'd have the odd toy that I liked, but I was never smothered in commodities, in products, in presents, It was just more being together with the family, more our real family, as well as, the spiritual family. So it was a very natural, kind of laid back, and we didn't have technology then, so everything was slower, very calm. It just felt life was at a slower pace, and it's so different to what life is today, especially for youngsters. But we didn't have all of the pulls of technology, so everything just took its time. That's what I remember about my childhood.
So tell us something about your college friends. Did they booze? They ate non-vegetarian food, or did they go to pubs and all?
Yeah, a big part of growing up is identity. And for me, no less. When you're young, you're easily influenced. We moved from Africa to London. And at 14, being in London, I saw a completely different side of life, a side of life that I'd never experienced before. So naturally I was intrigued by it, and I developed friendships that didn't have any spiritual knowledge. You know, they just, you know, it was all about having fun, spending time with them. You know, and pub culture is a big culture in the UK. You know, and eventually you fall into kind of going to these sorts of places because that's just part of the culture. But equally, I was fortunate enough to have joined almost like a Scouts type movement. So it wasn't quite the Scouts, it was more like the Air Training Corps. And this movement was interesting because it you know, it taught me a lot about discipline. You know, you have to wear a uniform, you've got to wear a beret, you've got to keep your shoes polished, you know, you've got to learn some skills. You're then kind of introduced to Royal Air Force stations, so they take you on tour to Royal Air Force stations where they teach you how to fly planes and gliding and shooting and all sorts of different things that you experience. So I was fortunate enough in my younger college days, I was impressioned by individuals that took a liking to this sort of lifestyle, you know. So that kind of, in some ways, protected me from pub culture and clubbing, but eventually, you know, I left because the age group, I suppose I went beyond the age group for being in kind of a Scouts type organisation, and it was just a natural part of experimenting with myself and understanding what it is I really want. So going out with my friends, clubbing, pubbing, drinking, absolutely, you know, that's something I did. But I did without really applying much thought to it. You know, I just wanted to enjoy myself, and I thought that was a way of enjoying myself because I didn't know of another way of enjoying myself, you know. The Scouts or the Air Training Corps that I used to go to was over. So I needed to kind of redefine myself and find something, and I couldn't quite see the right way to do that. You know, coming to the centre and understanding spiritual knowledge was all well and good. I'd never really go particularly because I couldn't see other young people there. So there wasn't a pull to the centre, you know. It was more just every time I went back I was easily influenced by my friends because there was nothing to keep me experimenting with spiritual knowledge. There was nothing fun about being in spirituality, you know. So yeah, that's a bit about the culture I was faced with.
Were you religious minded?
Always was religious minded. I think I'd forgotten as soon as I was influenced. Always forgotten where my roots come from. I always believed in God. That's one, and that's fundamental. I've always had this feeling that God exists. And I had this experience one time where I was a young boy and I was standing in front of my mum's wardrobe, and I opened that wardrobe and I had this experience that actually I can't believe this is me. I was touching my face and I was saying to myself, there has to be more than this. You know, so that was one experience I recall that I had. Nothing more happened after that, but I recognized that I was more than the body at that point in some subtle way, without understanding anything, you know. And I used to meditate when we were kids, and we'd go to the center for bhakti. Always this understanding that I'm connecting with God in my meditation, and I just accepted it. There wasn't resistance to it at all, you know. There was a complete acceptance. The resistance came when I was beginning to be conditioned and influenced by, you know, my friends who weren't spiritually minded, you know, and there was a bigger group of them. So essentially you follow the crowd. You know, you're trying to define yourself. You define yourselves by the people you look up to and that you're around, that you spend the most time with. So that's how it ended up.
So you went to the center because of your parents, or you wished to go there?
So centre life was interesting because initially I didn't have a choice. You know, mum and dad, every weekend we'd have to go to the centre. You know, they'd be going every day for class, but for the kids we'd have to go every weekend and spend time there. And nor was there any resistance from me either. I really enjoyed, you know, the loving atmosphere there. The sister there, she would make us pizzas. You know, on the one hand she would look after us like a caring mother, but on the other hand, she was a very disciplined teacher, you know, and, you know, turning another side of that, she could serve in so many different ways. So it's only later that I really began to appreciate the qualities of this type of person who I was learning from. But she was such a practical and real example of love that I was easily pulled to the center. Now, when I moved to the UK, the pull to the centre wasn't quite there. because the pull of lifestyle and the pull of being with my friends was more. You know, I'd go to the centre, I'd be falling asleep. You know, I really wouldn't be able to understand much about the knowledge. And, you know, I remember the sister there in the centre, I didn't really have much of a connection with her. I can't even remember having a conversation with her, ever. And we used to have a system where once the teachings or the murli is read, at the end of it, you know, everyone has to recall a point, you know, kind of relay a point so everyone understands what, you know, what each one took away. And for me, I'd go to the centre, and because I was forced to be there, I would remember a point initially and then go to sleep, and then in the end when they'd ask me, I'd wake up and tell them my point because I'd have remembered the first thing that I would have heard before going to sleep.
Okay.
So that was my centre life, you know, that's, and then eventually I just felt more and more disinterest. There wasn't a pull, there wasn't anything for youth. I look around, there was mum, my dad, there's old people, you know, there's old people there, and there wasn't anything active that was happening for young people. So I just drifted away. And it was a natural part of my journey to drift away at that point, you know. I didn't think anything of it. But I always felt I'd come back. I'd always felt, actually, there's something here and I will come back. You know, so I didn't make a conscious decision to leave, but I drifted away very naturally, if that makes sense, yeah?
Are you single?
I am single, yes.
You didn't think of getting married?
I have, you know, again, as a young man, you know, coming back to this knowledge. I came back at, what, the age of 23, you know, 23. But what pulled me back, which I think is probably more significant, is I began to see my lifestyle as a routine. So the lifestyle was going out on the Friday, getting drunk with the friends, coming back, you know, on Monday I'd be picking up bad habits, I'd be smoking, you know, so it wasn't a lifestyle that fulfilled me, clearly. And there was a question in my mind about that. And so I really began to question, you know, there's got to be more to life than this, you know, because for years, you know, for 4 or 5 years, I'd just been blindly following that lifestyle and not really feeling any love from it, just feeling more and more empty. And what I also recognized was that my energy levels had dropped. So whereas years before people would say I'd always be smiling, I'd always have a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, I had a very strong sense of determination and willpower. So I'd had all of those qualities in me, and then all of a sudden at 23, at a young age, I felt lacking in all of those areas. So I began to question, and everyone would see a look of worry on my face. So I came back to knowledge, having really understood, you know, that the outside world, something isn't quite right there. I don't fully know what, but let me experience spirituality as well. Let me see what this is all about. So I began to come there, and naturally that's when your journey begins, you know. I think I began to understand knowledge properly, or properly in the sense that I began to follow the disciplines. You know, I started, you know, experimenting with meditation and this connection, they say, with God. You know, I'd never had a connection with God before then. I'd always believed in God, but never really had a connection with Him. But as you kind of begin to go through your own journey, you know, the world has conditioned you to a certain way. It's conditioned you to look good, to feel good. Yeah, it's conditioned you to have an elevated social status to make you feel good about yourself, and actually that money is happiness. So those three are the basic conditions, the foundations of the conditionings of the world on myself. And undoing that takes time. So I kind of felt that my journey began, and this aspect of marriage came when I started changing too much. I had adopted spirituality, but I felt this resistance. Oh my God, I'm changing so quickly. This can't be right, because my old self was pulling me back. And the old self was saying, well, actually, your friends have all got girlfriends and they're all going to eventually get married. What do you actually want to do? Truthfully, I never thought I'd ever want to get married. I knew in my heart I never wanted to be married. But the feeling of loneliness and wanting to be with somebody and to be intimate with somebody was always something I craved for. Yeah, especially.
You were never with somebody. You were never with anyone.
I was. So at that point, you know, so before that point, I'd experimented with relationships, but nothing had fully worked for me. But even when I'd come and took Gyan for the first time, you know, things didn't really settle for me particularly easily. So I still kept on kind of living in that world and living in this world. So I had my feet in both camps, if that makes sense, you know. And I think it's part of the journey. I think a lot of people go through that because it's a crisis of identity. You know, you're letting go of one to kind of really beginning to understand and see that this is good for your life. You know, this is really good for your life. And it was so this aspect of relationship always pulled me, because that's something I had a craving for. But equally, as I began to experiment more and more, I began to have much more confidence in myself, because I was beginning to see that spirituality in the form of meditation, in the form of this knowledge, was really, really truthful. You know, I began to really clearly understand knowledge, you know, and the practical application of knowledge. So yes, you know, those sorts of things kind of eventually they died down, but it takes time. It does take time, because change, you know, you're changing from, you know, somebody who is been a certain way. You can't change overnight. Change takes time.
You really think so that power, status doesn't give you anything?
Well, actually, you know, this is an interesting one, because the train of my career had already started before I came back to knowledge. And this aspect of, you know, I need to have a good job, earn good money, have good income, will equate to my social status, was quite ingrained in me because of everything around me, all my cousins, all my peer group. So again, I still had my friends of the outside world, which I was, you know, where I was socializing. Then I had Gyan on this side, but no real examples to follow. Yeah, in this knowledge, in this spiritual path. So I had this constant battle where you have the knowledge saying one thing, and then you have the reality of how your friends are living and the happiness they portray in another aspect. So you've got pulls from both sides, actually. So this aspect of status is quite interesting, because, you know, I began to excel in my career. You know, even though I wasn't studious, I failed in every single one of my exams. I was given an opportunity to work for a company, and I worked very hard. And I found myself, you know, I found that I was good at something, and I began to take my sense of worth from being good at something, you know. I thought I was really good at this, you know, people would come to me all the time, they'd take advice from me, and I'd increase my status within the business because of what I could do, because of how good I was at what I did. And so status naturally became a part of my journey with my career. Yeah, as my career evolved, so did my position. And with that came my ego. You know, then you begin to recognize the power of the ego. And also, what spirituality and meditation has done to me is it's made me honest. I feel, you know, I feel I choose to lead a life of celibacy for a reason, because it's, you know, it has taught me to be honest with myself. You know, because actually the honesty inside of me allows me to see my life the way it actually is. So there's this aspect of leading your life blindly actually then became less and less for me, because my own inner conscience started biting. You know, so I'd have conflicts because of my ego. So I'd recognize that actually meditation would show me very clearly that actually it's my ego that's causing this. And there's nothing else to it. There's nothing else to it. So the truth could not be hidden from within me. You know what I mean? I think before knowledge, I didn't really have the capacity to see myself the way I saw myself after I was practicing meditation. Yeah, and that was without the emotion. The key thing for me is that what meditation teaches us is how to detach very clearly from your emotion, and to be able to see yourself in such a way where you're able to register, even to a subtle aspect, the thoughts that you're having, so you can correct yourself, yeah, rather than being pulled by the thoughts and really not even being aware that you're pulled by the thoughts, and before you know it, you're in the past, before you know it, you're in the future, and actually you're embroiled in emotion constantly. So the whole journey of spirituality has shown me detachment from emotion very clearly, and that alone is probably one of the reasons why I've excelled in my career at the same time, but also being able to see myself in a truthful and honest way. Yeah, so it's I guess made me more self-aware. Yeah.
So from childhood, were you an emotional kind of a person?
Yeah, as a child I was definitely emotional. You know, I always craved attention. I needed to, you know, I needed to kind of do things that made me feel good. You know, I was never studious, academic. I couldn't sit down and read a book. You know, I needed to ride my bicycle, do anything but study. So I just needed to be around friends. I needed to experience. So that's the kind of person I was kind of as a child and growing up. So with that comes a very sensitive nature. You know, I always wanted to be liked by people. You know, a big part of being me was being appreciated by my friend circle, by my family, by whoever. But exactly that. So being liked is such a big thing for me, you know, and I remember that created the sensitivity inside of me. And it was only after coming to knowledge and experiencing meditation, very naturally, I began to see my sensitive aspects, but also I would get less sensitive. The more I practiced meditation, the less emotional I would become. Yes, emotion is a good thing in terms of feeling the joys of love, you know, peace, because that's all, you know, good emotions, yeah. But the sensitive feelings that go with situations, conflict, they were being felt less. I felt more tolerant. I felt I could, because I wasn't getting sensitive and emotional, I could see a situation with clarity. And I could not just see the situation with clarity, but understand and see my role within that situation. I could also begin to detach the emotion from the person who is getting emotional in front of me. So if there was conflict in front of me, I would recognize what the person is trying to express without their emotion. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So this aspect of understanding my own sensitivities and my own emotion allowed me to see the emotions of other people and actually what they were really trying to express themselves. And what I recognized is, one of the biggest things is, when you're emotional and sensitive, you can't express yourself clearly. You can't be clear inside of yourself because you've got, you know, the frequency is all garbled inside you see. So you express yourself in a confused state where people don't understand you. And also, you can't express yourself in an essential way. So if someone asks me a question when I was in my emotional sensitive stage of growing up, then I would never listen to the question. I'd never be answering their question directly. Whereas knowledge and meditation really allows you to tune into the person in front of you, what it is they're actually asking, more importantly, what it is they want to hear. Do you know what I mean? What it is that they really are looking for, and then to be able to respond accordingly. So beginning to listen. So the peace inside of me allowed me to start listening.
So meditation helped you in that case?
Meditation absolutely started dampening the thoughts, and one of the biggest things I learned, and it allowed me to increase and evolve in my career, was my ability to listen to people. You know, so it developed a great listening habit, because actually I didn't need to talk anymore. I felt like more and more I wanted to be introverted. Yeah. Yes, there's a time to be extroverted, but I could choose those times and those moments. Yeah.
So Brother Ashish, it was nice talking to you. We will continue this journey in the next episode.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. Thank you viewers for watching the show.